I always believed that if it happened, I'd know. Some instinct would kick in. Something deep inside me would scream, "She's cheating." But that's not how it went. Instead, it started with a gut feeling. Something so small it felt ridiculous. Nicole had begun working late more than usual. At first, it seemed reasonable. Her new project at the marketing firm was demanding. She'd been promoted, so naturally, more hours came with it. I congratulated her, feeling proud of the woman I'd married. But one night, something shifted. It was subtle, almost invisible. She came home later than expected, saying she'd had to grab drinks with coworkers to unwind. She had this look on her face. Her eyes were sparkling, and she seemed too happy, a bit too distant. When I kissed her goodnight, her lips tasted like cheap wine, but she didn't look tired. She looked energized. I didn't think much of it then. Who was I to police her happiness? We'd been together 10 years, married for 5. I trusted her. But then the late nights became more frequent. Once a week turned into 3 times a week, then 4. She started wearing perfume more often, a scent she hadn't used in months, maybe years. Her phone, which she usually left lying around, was now always on her person, like a part of her body. Locked, guarded. And it hit me. I was staring at her across the dinner table one evening, watching her pick at her food with little interest, scrolling through her phone in between bites. She barely spoke to me. The realization slammed into my chest like a sledgehammer. Something is wrong. The first crack appeared that night, and I couldn't let it go. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I went looking. I started small, her social media, her emails. But I found nothing. Nicole was careful. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was imagining things. Then came Friday night. She told me she was working late again. But this time, she didn't come home until after midnight. When she walked in, she had the smell of aftershave clinging to her, not mine. I tried to kiss her, but she turned her head, giving me a weak smile as she headed straight for the shower. That was when I made the decision. I would follow her. The next day, I waited for her to mention the late night, to explain why she came home so late. She said nothing. Over breakfast, she acted like everything was fine, like we hadn't barely spoken the night before, like I hadn't noticed that unfamiliar scent on her. "I'll be home late again tonight," she said casually, scrolling through her phone. "There's this presentation we need to finalize." I nodded, masking the rising panic in my chest. "Sure, no problem." She flashed me a quick smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. Then she kissed me on the cheek and headed out the door. The moment it clicked shut, I felt my pulse quicken. Tonight, I thought. I'm going to follow her tonight. I spent the day trying to act normal, but my mind was a mess of racing thoughts. What if I was wrong? What if this was all just a coincidence, and I was the one ruining things by becoming suspicious? But every time I thought about letting it go, that nagging feeling returned. The smell of aftershave, the late nights, the guarded phone. Too many things didn't add up. As the clock ticked toward evening, my anxiety grew. Nicole texted around 7 p.m., saying she was going to the office after grabbing dinner with some colleagues. That was my window. I grabbed my car keys, careful not to make a sound as I left the house. I drove to her office parking lot and parked in the shadow of a large tree where I could see the entrance but wouldn't be seen. My heart was pounding in my chest, every minute feeling like an hour. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then I saw her. She wasn't alone. Nicole walked out of the office building with a man I recognized, a coworker she'd mentioned once or twice, a guy named Brian. They weren't just walking side by side. They were close. His hand brushed against her lower back as they moved toward his car, and she didn't flinch. In fact, she laughed at something he said, throwing her head back in a way I hadn't seen in months. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and crushed my heart. I watched as they got into his car together and drove off. The sick, twisting feeling in my stomach intensified. This was it, the proof I needed. But I wasn't done yet. I tailed them, keeping my distance as they navigated through the city streets. I was sweating, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. They stopped at a restaurant, a small, dimly lit place I'd never been to before. For the next 2 hours, I watched them through the window as they had dinner. From where I sat, I couldn't hear anything, but I didn't need to. Their body language said it all. The way they leaned in close to each other, the way Brian touched her hand as they talked. This wasn't just dinner between coworkers. Then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, they left the restaurant together. They didn't drive back to the office. They didn't go to separate places. They went to a hotel. I sat in my car, frozen, as I watched them disappear into the hotel lobby. My stomach churned with nausea, my head spinning. There was no more guessing, no more wondering if I was overreacting. Nicole was cheating on me, right in front of my eyes. For a long time, I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the hotel door, waiting for the shock to wear off. But it didn't. My mind raced, the images of them together looping over and over. The scent of aftershave on her skin. The way she turned her face away when I tried to kiss her. Her late nights at the office. It all made sense now. She'd been lying to me for weeks, maybe months. I wasn't sure what to do next. Should I go in there? Should I confront them right now? My hands were shaking. My phone vibrated. It was Nicole. Hey babe, just wrapping up here. I'll be home in an hour or so. Don't wait up. My blood ran cold. The sheer audacity of it. The nerve of her to text me while she was God knows where with Brian. I could barely breathe, my chest tightening with fury. I wanted to burst into that hotel and drag her out, scream at her, make her explain herself. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear. But I couldn't do it, not yet. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I drove home and waited. When she finally came through the door, I pretended to be asleep. I heard her undress quietly, slipping into bed beside me like nothing was wrong. The scent of that same aftershave still lingered on her, even after a shower. I felt sick, lying there next to her. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, Nicole acted like nothing had changed. She kissed me goodbye, headed to work, and I watched her go with cold, calculated focus. I was done being passive. I needed concrete proof, something undeniable that I could confront her with. Something she couldn't talk her way out of. I started with her phone. She always kept it close, but I knew her password. She'd used the same one for years. When she came home that night and left it charging in the kitchen, I seized my opportunity. With trembling fingers, I unlocked it. I scrolled through her messages. Most of them seemed normal, chats with friends, family, and coworkers. But then I found it, a thread with Brian, buried under her list of conversations. At first glance, nothing seemed incriminating. But the more I scrolled, the worse it got. I miss you already. Last night was incredible. You're all I can think about. Let's meet again next week. I can't wait to see you. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my ears. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. There it was, the proof I needed. Explicit, unmistakable. She'd been lying to me for months. I wanted to smash the phone, scream, throw something. But I didn't. I took a deep breath, put the phone back exactly where she'd left it, and sat down at the kitchen table, waiting for her to come home. The waiting was the hardest part. Every minute felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I sat there, staring at the kitchen clock, the proof still burning in my mind. Nicole would be home soon, and I wasn't sure if I could hold it together. All the rage, the betrayal, the gut-wrenching feeling of knowing she'd been lying to me for months. It was building up inside like a volcano ready to erupt. When I heard her key in the door, my body tensed. This was it. No more pretending. No more second chances. Tonight, I was going to confront her with the truth. She walked in, looking as put together as ever. Her work clothes were crisp, makeup flawless, like the perfect wife coming home after a long day at the office. But I knew the truth now. I knew exactly who she was. Hey, babe, she called out, cheerfully oblivious. How was your day? I couldn't stand the sound of her voice. That same, sweet tone she'd been using for weeks, maybe even months, while she snuck around behind my back. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but my hands were already clenched into fists. She walked into the kitchen, saw me sitting there, and frowned. Everything okay? You look upset. Upset? That was an understatement. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my vision narrowing, but I forced myself to stay composed. I wasn't going to let her off easy. We need to talk, I said, my voice low, barely controlled. Nicole's frown deepened. What about? I stood up, slowly, deliberately, and reached for her phone on the counter. I saw her eyes widen as I held it up. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. I know, Nicole, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I know about you and Brian. Her face turned pale in an instant. For a split second, I saw panic flash in her eyes, but then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by her usual calm. She was good at this. Too good. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice steady. I couldn't believe it. She was still going to lie. Even now, with all the proof in my hands. Don't, I growled, stepping toward her. Don't lie to me, Nicole. I saw the messages. I followed you. I watched you go to that hotel with him. I know everything. That hit her. I could see it. The way her eyes darted away, the slight tremble in her hands. But still, she tried to hold her ground. You're overreacting, she said, her voice wobbling slightly. Brian and I are just friends. We had a work meeting at the hotel, that's all. You're being paranoid. Paranoid? My blood boiled. The audacity. She was really going to stand here and try to gaslight me, make me feel like I was the one losing my mind? I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the phone down on the table, the sound echoing through the kitchen. Stop lying. I shouted, my voice hoarse with anger. I've seen the texts, Nicole. You're not just friends. You've been sleeping with him, haven't you? Her face went completely blank. The calm mask she'd been wearing started to crack, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. But still, she didn't admit it. Do you really want to do this? She said, her voice now cold and defensive. You're going to throw away everything we have over a misunderstanding? I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and painful in my own ears. A misunderstanding? You call this a misunderstanding? You've been screwing another man behind my back, and you expect me to just, what? Pretend it didn't happen? Go back to the way things were? She crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. You're being dramatic. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't believe this was happening. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd trusted with my life, was standing in front of me, acting like this was no big deal, like I was the problem. I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. Tell me the truth, Nicole. Tell me right now, or I swear to God. Or what? She cut in, her voice rising now, her anger starting to show. What are you going to do, huh? Throw me out? Ruin everything we've built over some stupid mistake? Mistake? I hissed, my fists clenched at my sides. Is that what you call it? A mistake? She didn't flinch. Yeah, a mistake. I messed up, but it's not what you think. Brian, he doesn't mean anything. It was just, she faltered for a moment, looking away, but then straightened herself, her voice hard. It was nothing. Nothing. The word echoed in my mind, twisting the knife deeper. She was trying to minimize it, to make me believe it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than anything. You cheated on me, I said, my voice raw, filled with hurt. You lied to my face for months. I did it because you weren't there, she shot back, her voice suddenly loud and venomous. You've been so checked out lately, so distant. I needed someone. I needed attention, and you weren't giving it to me. There it was. The blame. The justification. The gut punch I'd been dreading. I staggered back, the words hitting me like a physical blow. She was really going to turn this around on me. Make me the villain in her twisted story. You're blaming me, I said, my voice trembling with disbelief. You're blaming me for this? Her eyes were blazing now, all pretense of calm gone. Yeah, I am. You think you're so perfect? You think you're the victim here? You've been distant for months, acting like I don't even exist. What was I supposed to do? I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Everything was unraveling so fast, and I felt like I was falling, spinning out of control. I had never imagined it would come to this. You could have talked to me, I whispered, my voice barely audible. You could have told me how you felt, but instead, you chose to betray me. She said nothing, her eyes hard, her lips pressed into a thin line. The silence between us was deafening. I stood there, staring at her, feeling the last shred of our marriage slipping away. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I thought I loved, was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Someone who had lied, cheated, and now blamed me for it all. I felt sick. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room. I couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't look at her. The moment the door closed behind me, I realized it was over. There was no going back. I walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me. The air outside was thick, humid, but it did nothing to cool the rage that was burning inside me. My mind was spinning, my heart racing. I could still hear her voice in my head, blaming me, twisting everything around. How did it come to this? How did the woman I'd shared my life with for so long become a stranger, a liar? I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of it all. The betrayal, the lies, the blame. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, not knowing where to go, what to do. I couldn't go back home. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face her again. The image of her with Brian, the smug lies, the way she turned everything on me. It was all too much. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind raced through every moment, every red flag I had ignored, every lie I had swallowed because I trusted her. But now, there was no more trust. Only anger. Only betrayal. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the texts again, reading her messages to Brian. Last night was incredible. I can't wait to see you again. Each line was like a dagger to the chest. I couldn't breathe. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not without consequences. The next day, I made my decision. I wasn't going to let Nicole walk all over me anymore. I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. I contacted a divorce lawyer that morning, setting the wheels in motion. The conversation was surreal. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting in a lawyer's office, preparing to end my marriage. But here I was. That evening, when I came home, she was waiting for me. Her face was calm, but I could see the unease in her eyes. She knew something had shifted, that this wasn't just another fight. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice softer than before. "About what you said. I messed up. Okay? But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work on things. I still love you." I laughed. It was bitter, harsh. "You love me?" I said, shaking my head. "Is that what you were telling Brian too? Or was he just a placeholder until you decided I was good enough again?" She winced, but I didn't care anymore. I was done with the games, the lies. "I'm filing for divorce, Nicole," I said, my voice cold, final. "It's over." Her eyes widened, genuine shock crossing her face for the first time. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." She stood there, stunned. For once, she had nothing to say. No excuses. No lies. Just silence. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, meetings with lawyers, and awkward, tense exchanges with Nicole as we navigated the logistics of ending our marriage. She tried a few more times to talk, to convince me to work things out, but I was done. I'd seen the real her. The woman who could lie to my face for months, sleep with someone else, and then blame me for it. There was no coming back from that. The divorce was finalized quickly. No kids, no major assets to fight over. It was cleaner than I expected, but it didn't make it hurt any less. Walking out of the courtroom after signing the final papers felt like leaving behind a part of my life I'd never get back. That night, I sat alone in what used to be our house, now filled with nothing but silence. The emptiness was deafening. I thought I'd feel relief, but instead, there was just a hollow ache in my chest. I'd lost something. Not just my marriage, but a piece of myself. The trust one once had in Nicole and us. It was shattered, and I wasn't sure I'd ever get it back. It's been a few months since the divorce, and things are different. I've moved out of the house, started fresh somewhere new. But the scars are still there. I think they always will be. Every time I think about what Nicole did, how she lied, how she made me feel like I was the one going crazy, it still burns. But there's something else too. Something I didn't expect. Freedom. As much as it hurt to end things, there's a sense of relief now that it's over. I don't have to worry about who she's with, where she's going, or what lies she'll tell next. I can breathe again. There's still anger, sure, but with time, I've started to let it go. She made her choices, and I made mine. I chose to walk away with my dignity intact, and that's something no one can take from me. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that you can't control what someone else does. You can only control how you react. And in the end, I chose me. If you're reading this and going through something similar, I want you to know you're not alone. I thought I was crazy for a long time, doubting myself, questioning everything. But trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking you're overreacting. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're the problem when they're the one betraying you. Stand your ground. You deserve honesty, respect, and love. And if you're not getting that, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to choose yourself, even if it means losing someone you thought you'd spend your life with. I won't lie and say everything's perfect now. I still have days where the anger flares up, where I think about what could have been. But I'm moving forward. Slowly, day by day. I've reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I'd forgotten about, and started focusing on my own happiness. It's strange being single again after so long, but it's also freeing. There's a whole world out there, and I'm ready to see where life takes me next. Nicole is just a chapter in my story, one that's closed now. I ran into her a few weeks ago. It was awkward, as you'd expect. She looked different. Maybe it was the guilt. Maybe it was just time. But something had changed in her. We exchanged polite hellos, small talk about work, life. She asked if I was seeing anyone, and I told her no. It didn't seem to surprise her. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." I nodded, not really knowing how to respond. Maybe part of me wanted to hear it, but it didn't matter anymore. I had already made peace with it. "I know," I said, and that was it. We parted ways without looking back. So that's my story. It's not the happy ending I imagined when I stood at the altar with Nicole all those years ago, but it's my ending. I walked away stronger, wiser, and more certain of what I deserve in a relationship. Betrayal cuts deep, but it doesn't define you. How you choose to heal does. I'm still healing, but I know I'll be okay. In fact, I think I'm going to be better than I ever was before. And if you're reading this, going through your own hell, just know that you'll be okay too. You'll get through it. And one day, you'll look back and realize you made the right choice.